Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and if you haven't heard, you can now buy your passport to the Outerverse from Outside Magazine. The passport is an NFT that features 8-bit graphics like a video game out of 1995. That was a time when magazines mattered, but they don't anymore in Outside's opinion, so they are pivoting to this new money grab. The passport costs $250, and there are 10,000 of them. And Outside Magazine keeps telling us that they will sell out, while the general public, on the other hand, seems to be laughing at this scam or cash grab or whatever you want to call it. And to be honest, I don't understand this whole concept. Pay for an NFT, and what? You get access to the outdoors, or Outside is rewarding you for doing stuff? Fuck that shit. In my opinion, go outside and do whatever you want. You don't need a computer platform rewarding you. And if you do, that's sad. And what's even sadder is all the money that they're spending on this crap. They have a ton of influential people on the roster, and from my experience, the people that they have like to be paid for their time and effort. So everything that you see on a promoted post by anyone for this, the ads, the people are bought. And the money that could create great events and great magazines, well, that's being spent on this NFT experiment. And really, the money could help take care of the Outside staff that was so frustrated with their treatment that there was talks of unionization and mass exodus. But no, Outside pretty much laughed and flexed on those employees, and I believe they've upped their investment into code, not people. To add insult to injury, one of the new digital properties that they have going is a podcast with their CEO and a former NFL player. This is exactly what people who want the outdoors do not need. A podcast with two rich dudes telling you how and why you need to intertwine your digital life with your real life. I haven't listened because I try to stay away from people jerking themselves off to their own ideas, good or bad. I don't need that shit in my life. Did I complain enough in this intro about it? I hope so, because I'm done. And now it's time to talk about my guest this week. The first overnight success I've had on the show, but really, it should be known that there are no truly overnight successes in action sports. Everyone works their ass off. And Robin Goomes' road to the top of the mountain bike world started on a remote island and took a path through the military before working her way into becoming a professional mountain biker. It's one of the more unique stories I've had on the show, and before we get into it, I need to ask you to review me wherever you listen to the show and follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. And finally, please support my amazing sponsors who make the show happen. They are Rollerblade, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Elon Skis, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk with Robin Goomes. So based on me doing my research for this podcast, it doesn't seem like you've done too much media. Is there any reason for that?
Honestly, I'm pretty new to it, so I haven't been around that long. Only the last year I've kind of got out there, so this is my first podcast.
Nice, and I hate to say it, but can we try your headphones? It is a little echoey.
Yeah, okay, sweet. I'm not going to lie, I've never actually used FaceTime either, so lots of firsts for me right now.
We're not looking at each other though, are we?
No.
We're just doing audio, okay.
Hang on a second, sorry.
No problem.
How's that?
I think it's going to be great. I think it was more when you were maybe talking away from the speakerphone that it went echoey, so we'll be good.
Okay, sweet.
So is it a Kiwi thing too? Like letting your actions speak louder than your words and not really doing as many interviews? Or is it just because you're so new to this whole thing?
Maybe it's both for me. I definitely live by trying to let my actions speak louder than my words. I'm not really big on speaking, so you might struggle to get too many words from me, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, that's going to be the challenge for me, and I guess it's something for you. Based on your career absolutely blowing up over the past year and a half, 2 years, it's really been an overnight success story almost in the world of action sports. But you're going to have to start getting used to this almost because now you're a professional athlete that's traveling the world, and is it almost hard to comprehend for you? Is this like a dream?
Yeah, for sure. It still feels like a dream. It's happened so fast, and I'm trying to roll with it because I still have no idea what's going on, really.
And before we talk about your meteoric rise in the bike world, we need to talk about your unique life. And you grew up in the Chatham Islands, and where the hell is that place?
It's 800 kilometres roughly off the east coast of New Zealand. It's a pretty small island. It's like a 2-hour flight from, we call it the mainland, which is just New Zealand. Yeah, so pretty isolated. It has phone reception now, but like when I was growing up, there was like no internet. I remember when broadband came about and like no cell phone reception as well. So pretty different, yeah.
I interviewed a good friend of yours, Casey Brown, a while back, and she had a pretty isolated upbringing as well. Like so remote that she told me a story that people would show up on her island with white bread and they would give her some white bread and she thought it was candy. Was your upbringing similar to hers or was she way more remote?
I think Casey was definitely more remote. Like it was just her and her family. So they were pretty isolated out there. On the island, there's like 500 to 600 people living there. So like there's a couple of different schools and like 1 or 2 shops sort of thing, So like it's still like a town and stuff. I think a similar story to that is like when people come out to the mainland, they always take back like McDonald's, KFC, all of the like real nasty fast foods because you can't get it there. So
right.
That's the same thing for us.
And is it one of those places made up of all different kinds of characters, like some trying to hide or get away from things, some trying to raise a family, and others who just love isolation?
Yeah, I guess a bit of everything. Like most of the people are just locals and people who have grown up there and just never really left, or people who have left and come back. So it's all pretty like tight-knit community and everyone's related or knows everyone. Everyone definitely knows each other, but yeah, it's pretty tight.
And what do your folks do to support the family? What's mom and dad's jobs?
Oh, growing up or like now?
Growing up, I think.
Oh, yeah, right. So it was just my mum, and my sister.
Okay.
My mum was working for Doc down there, so just pest control and tree plant. To me, it was just like a bunch of random things like planting trees and looking after the wildlife and stuff that was there and pest control as well.
And so your dad is totally out of the picture? Like you didn't have a relationship with him?
Yeah, I did when I was younger. This is deep already, holy.
Sorry.
Yeah, when I was younger, he was around like growing up in Christchurch. I was in Christchurch till I was 5. And then my parents split, so that's when we went back to the Chathams with mum, because that's where like all of her family and stuff's from.
Okay.
So from then, like we're in contact, and we'd come out to New Zealand maybe once a year, maybe once every 2 years, sort of thing. So kind of saw him around a bit then, but slowly just grown apart, and he's kind of living another life now and got another family and stuff. So.
Yeah, so that's got to be a challenge for you as well, but it seems like you turned out great and you were able to do a lot of the things that people that have dads living there are kind of pushed into, because it sounds like you grew up on a dirt bike. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that was actually a cool thing that my dad did for me. So like when I was on the Chathams, most of my mates were actually boys, and everyone there rides dirt bikes or quad bikes, and like I just grew up wanting one so bad. Like all the boys were riding them, and I was like having goes on theirs and was just like begging for one. So I finally got one for like my 10th birthday. And then, yeah, that kind of just like kicked off pretty much me loving everything to do with 2 wheels.
And while it might not be PC for me to say anymore, I'm going to assume that you were considered maybe a tomboy when you were growing up. And that's a term that we use here in the States for like the girl that hangs out with all the boys and comes home dirty and plays and gets cut, and we just use that term, and I don't think we use it anymore because I don't think it's right. But would that be a fair assessment to who you were as a kid?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that's changed either. Like I'm pretty much still the same, really. Definitely got way more friends that are girls, but I'd say they're all pretty well in that category a little bit as well.
Okay. And then on the islands growing up, what do you do for fun other than ride your dirt bike?
I guess like just being outdoors. So you'd go fishing, hunting, like helping out on the farm and stuff. Like lots of my family had farms. So, well, again, like I was ripping around on the dirt bike, like mustering the cattle and stuff. That stuff was what I found fun. So I guess that's like a job for a lot of people, but it was just good times for me. And like just lots of fishing and stuff. Just getting out and getting dirty, I guess.
And when you say working on the farm, when I talk to people about you today, They talk about your work ethic. They compare you to Jossie Wells, which is an insane compliment. He's one of those guys that works harder than anybody else. And it sounds like you're one of those women that works harder than anybody else. But is that something you learned from being a kid working on the farm and just having to put in a lot of work on these farms?
Yeah, maybe. I feel like it's probably kind of stemmed a little bit from that and probably a career in the army.
Yep.
But like having to keep up with the boys and like, pull your weight there. So feeling like you have to work twice as hard to get to the same spot sort of thing. But also I think just enjoying what you're doing makes it not feel like work.
Yeah, it's just sometimes hard work isn't enjoyable, but it doesn't seem like you have a problem with it, which is cool. But another thing of where you grew up, are there team sports on the island as well?
Yes, the island's pretty cool for that stuff. There's Friday night touch where there's like different touch teams from different parts of the island and they come play touch together. Netball as well was pretty big. And then same for the kids, like they have kids teams and like ripper rugby and stuff like that. But to be quite honest, I never got into any of that because I was just already at this point, dirt bikes were the only thing I wanted to do.
And is the riding pretty much wide open there? Like you can pretty much go anywhere?
Yeah, like you just start your bike at your house, drive down the road, like none of the cars there are road legal. Well, some of them, but like it's one of those places you just like cruise around town on dirt bikes and stuff and that's super chill there. So we could ride the beaches, the farms, it was pretty cool. Like my mum's partner who also worked for Doc, he was real into motocross and he kind of teamed up with some of the local farmers who had really good land and we built some like natural terrain motocross track sort of things and held like motocross days at those.
Sick. And it seems like the kids that I know that have ridden moto growing up, they're the ones who are not afraid to pin it in any situation. Like the power of the bike taught them to manage fear easier in other places. Do you look at moto as like the foundation of everything you're doing on a bike today?
Yeah, for sure. I think moto, and when I was a kid, I had just some random, I think it was a Huffy mountain bike from the warehouse or something. Not like anything special, but I'd wrap around on that thing and like back pedal skids and stuff like that. So I think just riding bikes in general and of course the motos have definitely led me to where I am.
And there was a little bit of BMX, I think, in your childhood too. Were you BMX racing or did you just have a BMX bike?
I was BMX racing, so that was in high school. Like there's no high school on the Chatham, so you have to come out to mainland, and I was going out to Christchurch for my school terms and I didn't have my dirt bike that was still on the Chathams and I really wanted to ride something. I lived maybe less than a K from the local BMX track, so got a BMX bike and just started going to like club nights there and then just started like racing bikes and stuff like BMX for, I think I did it for like 3 years during high school.
And that's wild to me that you would leave the Chathams to go to the mainland, so you're 2 hours away from family to go to school. Do you stay with like a surrogate family or something?
My nan was living in Christchurch, so me and my sister just stayed in Christchurch with her, and it's only a 2-hour flight, but it's very expensive. So you fly out for your school term, stay with family, and then you go home for the school holidays.
Man, it's so weird that you spent so much time away. I mean, like you didn't spend much time at all with your dad and then with your mom through high school, which are really formative years for a kid. You're only seeing your mom in the summer times and maybe at Christmas, but probably not because it's so expensive to fly home.
Yeah, you're making it sound worse than it is. It wasn't that bad.
Okay.
But I definitely got homesick. Like you come from this small isolated place out to mainland and you don't know anyone. It's big city living. Like I was so used to farm life and like that was pretty crazy. But like I don't know what there is, maybe 4 school holidays during the year, which are each like 2 weeks long, and then your Christmas holidays are like 6 or 8 weeks. So like it was a good chunk of time spent at home, and it definitely made it really nice when you did get to go home and just unwind a little bit from like the big smoke and go be on the farm and the island again.
And there's a few other things about the island I want to talk about before we get into your army life. How about the beach? I mean, I would think there's some big surf out your way. Did you get into surfing at all?
I dabbled a little bit growing up. Like some people are into it, but there's a lot of sharks as well. Like Chatham's is pretty known for great whites. So, you'd be set up in town and it looks out over the beach. And some days you'd actually see sharks out in the water.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. And it was like, we did it now and then for fun, but yeah, I guess I didn't get super into it.
And I mean, are there times where they're pulling people out of the water because shark danger is high?
Well, there's no lifeguards or anything like that. If you're on the beach, it's just you and whoever you're with.
Gotcha.
But like the islands, one of the main industries there is like fishing and diving. So all of the divers down there are having pretty close shark attack, close calls and actually attacks and stuff. So yeah, like you hear stories from the divers and it's pretty gnarly.
Yeah. And then I would think you have some insane storms. I'm sure you'd have to suffer through some pretty heavy times living on an island in isolation. What was the worst of the weather that you remember?
I don't think it was that bad. I do remember like tsunami warnings and stuff like that, but you kind of just blow over it. It doesn't really seem like much when you're a kid. But really heavy winds all the time. Like you go there and a lot of the trees are just sideways from the wind.
Huh. And what's crazy to me is that after all your schooling, you end up joining the Army. But the more I think about you and living in an isolated spot, I see the military as maybe a way out of the islands and into the real world. But then talking to you, it sounds like you spent your high school in the real world. But did the travel of the military have anything to do with you joining?
Yeah, it did actually. I guess I knew after high school that going back to Chatham's wasn't a great idea. You know, you're fishing, farming, or not a whole lot else really. It's not a good place to get after your dreams really. So going home didn't feel right and I wanted to do something like outdoors, hands-on. It kind of just felt like all of those things I'd grown up doing and was really into. And yeah, I figured you can get good qualifications, you can travel. Seemed like if you get after it, you could definitely do some cool things there.
For sure. But the one thing I find with the military is, I mean, usually you enlist and you enter at the ground level. A lot of people who do that, at least in the States, they really don't have that much direction in life and it's an easy choice for them. You know, and I think you find like a lot of misled youth in the military and there's a lot of toxic masculinity as well. And it's usually not the most welcoming place for women, at least from what I've heard here in the States. But what's it like when you enlist in New Zealand?
It's pretty good. I feel like, yeah, maybe a little bit of misled youth, but you have to like pass tests. You have to be like physically and mentally good enough to get in. So I had to train just to get in, and you can't just be in there. Like you go through a 4-month induction sort of thing where you just get smashed, and if you don't want to be there, you're not going to make it. So you have to like really want it. And for women, I think it's pretty welcoming now, and I think I probably joined at a good time where it was like getting better. I can imagine that it was probably similar to the States years ago, but it was definitely a good time for us to be joining.
And what's the goal when you get in? Is there something that you want to specialize in, or are you just like, get me in here and I'll figure it out?
Yeah, that pretty much just get me in and see what happens. Yeah, I was just really in it for a bit of a journey. I thought I'd do it for maybe a couple of years, but once you're in and you kind of pick a pathway and you start working towards something, I ended up being there for 5 years just because, you know, you start doing something and get pretty carried away.
And is the New Zealand military, are you guys carrying guns?
Yeah, so you do all like your weapon training and stuff. Like everyone gets trained to be like a basic rifleman before you go into a trade, and every year you have to pass like your shooting tests and stuff. So you definitely cover the basics, but I went into the engineers, so it was like maybe less combat style role, and I guess we were like more of a peacekeeping sort of army.
Well, that's the best kind of army to have.
Yeah.
Do you get sent anywhere cool? I mean, do you get to realize some travel dreams being in the military?
Yeah, so I hadn't really done much travel at this point, and I got sent on, it was a World War One 100-year memorial like parade over in Europe. So we went to Passchendaele, and it was really cool for me because like we flew with the Air Force to get there, and it was just like marching and those sort of drills. So you turn up, you do like a 2-hour parade, and we did 7 of those, I think, over a 2-week time in Europe. So it was like 7 lots of 2 hours here and there, and then it just felt like a bit of a eye-opening vacation sort of thing.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing bike demos, and then you get to go enjoy the city after that. 2 hours you're going to
Yeah.
ride, and then here we go.
Yes, pretty much. So that was really cool. And then I also got to go to Antarctica, and I deployed there for like 5 months.
Sick. What's that place
Yeah.
like? I've never, you see footage of it, but is it cool or do you get over it pretty quickly?
I loved it. It was probably one of the coolest things I've ever done. It's like everything you see is like cold, dry, isolated. Again, I think growing up definitely helped with that. I actually loved kind of just being unplugged, like no phones, and like you can sit there and be bored, or you can go do stuff, and there's so much happening there. It was like 2 km from the US base. I was at Scott base, and the US base McMurdo was like just over the hill. And between the two bases, they have like friendly competitions, and there's always stuff happening. So you can definitely keep yourself busy and definitely learned a lot as well.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start out with Rollerblade, the brand that pretty much invented the sport of inline skating. If you haven't been on inline skates in a while, you are missing out on the most fun way to get in shape. Think a full body workout without the knee pain and jarring impact of running or the expense and travel hassle of a bike. And skating can be whatever you want it to be. Adrenaline pumping high-speed fun, recreational fitness, freestyle, skate parks. The opportunities for fun and adventure are endless. On top of that, there's no better way to cross-train for ski season. And Rollerblade makes getting your ski legs back easier than ever with their Skate to Ski app, which is available on the App Store. To find out more about the Skate to Ski app and all the Rollerblade inline skates, head on over to rollerblade.com. My next sponsor is Elan Skis, and I'm in love with my ripsticks. They are so fun and lively, all while remaining light and stable. And there's something different about skis designed in the Slovenian Alps by real skiers. And what's really amazing is that they built a solar power plant on top of their state-of-the-art factory. And Elan let me know that this independence from fossil fuels, along with the new solar plant, will provide a carbon sink as powerful as 15,000 trees on an annual basis. So not only will Elan skis make you a better skier, but they are putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to the planet. To find out more about all things Elan and what they're doing with their factory, head on over to elanskis.com. My final sponsor this round is a place you can get your Elan skis, your Rollerblade inline skates, and everything for your summer fun. Think wakeboarding, swimming, and so much more. I'm talking about Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and they have been the one-stop shop for all your needs for over 60 years. And these days, if you can't get to their store, well, you still have the same great experience online over at peterglenn.com. The site has all the brands, all the products, and they offer free shipping on orders of $49 or more, a no-hassle return policy, and they price match any reputable shop on the web. So please support the brand that supports me, and check out Peter Glenn before you buy somewhere else. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Being a Lance Corporal that's close to the bottom of the ranks, do you spend a good part of that life obeying orders?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like my entire career was like you're kind of just led by someone else and you have to do what you're told to some degree. But I mean, if you just get your work done and do as you're told and keep your head down, it's pretty chill. It's crazy to look at now. Like after what I'm doing now is a pretty crazy chunk of my life.
Yeah, because in the bike world, nobody tells you what to do. I'm sure people suggest things, but the dirt's your canvas. So I would think it's a hard thing to deal with in the military, is just being told what to do all the time. It's like, yes, sir, no, sir, all the time, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was good for me at the time, but after going into biking and living how I'm living now, it'd be pretty hard to try join up and be back in the military again.
Yeah, I can imagine. Was there anything sketchy that you did?
Not really. Nah, definitely not sketchy.
And while you're in the military, are you still able to ride dirt bikes or BMX or anything like that?
Yeah, so once you've done all your courses, and unless you're on a course, it's just like a 8 till 4 job. So after work, you can go for rides, and that's how I actually got into mountain biking. I was on a course with a friend, and he was riding the local trails in Palmerston North, and he was just telling me about it. I hadn't been like riding BMX or motos or anything since I joined, and it kind of just sparked that interest again. I was like, man, like, I'm craving this, but like with the job and stuff, I hadn't really picked up a bike, and kind of took that opportunity to go out with him after the course that day and absolutely loved it.
And what's so interesting about your story is while other pro bikers I've spoke with, maybe they've started with BMX or moto and then they made the switch to a mountain bike, they usually make the switch a long, long time ago. But you got into mountain biking 5 years ago?
Yeah, 5 years ago.
That's just crazy because, I mean, we'll talk about where you are today, but to get to the top of the industry in 5 years is insane. Given you've biked before, it's not like you just got on a bike for the first time. But 2017, I think, is when you get your first mountain bike and you have that BMX and moto background. I would think the transition is pretty easy, but what do I know? What's the hardest thing to master when you make the switch?
It didn't really feel like a switch for me because it'd been a while since I'd been on the motos and the BMX. It felt like a whole new sport and I was just picking something up for the first time. But I still had all of those basic bike skills from all of the years of moto and BMX. So I guess I learned a lot quicker and it was probably pretty enjoyable from the start.
Yeah, and going out with that friend of yours, you're probably not slowing him down. He's probably pretty impressed, like, whoa, how are you even keeping up if this is your first mountain bike? But then he doesn't realize maybe all the experience you have on moto and BMX back in the day.
I wish it went like that. It actually didn't go like that. He took me down the chunkiest, gnarliest trail there was, and I was on like the worst bike ever. It was like a dirt jump hardtail,
Okay.
one rear brake and street tires. And I actually had to walk most of it. So I think, it was a pretty standard first experience, but most people hate that. And I walked most of it and I was like, man, I want to learn how to ride this. So I've got to get a mountain bike. I'm going to come back. I'm going to learn how to ride this stuff. And I think he was probably more impressed maybe a month later. I'd gone out and bought a proper mountain bike and was actually quicker than him real quickly.
And were you shocked when you went to go buy the mountain bike, just seeing the pricing of mountain bikes? Because I would think that mountain bike prices, if you're going to buy something high end, and I doubt you bought something super high end right away, but you could spend as much as you would on your dirt bike.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised. I didn't really expect that. I was like, this thing's just a couple of wheels and a chunk of metal. Like, how can it cost this much? And it doesn't really make sense compared to a dirt bike. I don't really get that, but yeah, I bought a pretty cheap one. I think it was like $2,000 New Zealand. So really entry level full suspension bike. And it did the job. Like it got me into it and I was loving it. It actually got stolen. So I rode it for like 3 or 4 months and it got me really into it. And then it got stolen. And I was lucky to have insurance and it ended up being a good way to upgrade to like a proper bike.
Yeah, so it was a nice thing that thing got stolen. And at this time, the army is winding down for you. What makes you leave, or how does it all end?
Yeah, so originally I was like, I'll do 2 years at this and see how we go. After 2 years, I knew about the Antarctica trip and that's all I wanted to do. So I spent basically the rest of my time just working towards getting to Antarctica. And I went and did that trip and it was super inspirational. I met heaps of crazy people just doing like the most random things with their lives. And it was a bit of an eye-opening experience and with all the people I'd met from all over the world. And I kind of just decided that I'd ticked off that goal from the army and it felt like a good time to just kind of park it there. And I was super into mountain biking. So I was like, well, why not just give that a solid go? So left the army and moved to Rotorua and just rode bikes as much as I could.
So it was a calculated thing. It was like, hey, I'm skilled at this and I know I am. And if I put everything I have into biking, I'm going to see if I can make a career out of it. It wasn't just like, hey, I'm going to take 2 years and go ride my bike and have fun.
I mean, it was both those things. Like it was take some time, ride my bike, have fun. But I kind of thought, why not give it a go and try turn it into a career? I had no idea. Like living in New Zealand, you can't compare yourself. Like in Europe, you've got neighbouring countries everywhere and you kind of know where you stand. But New Zealand, you're only comparing yourself to other riders there. So you don't know if you're actually good or not. Yeah, so I just figured I'd save some money and I could probably do some travel, ride my bike in some places and at least get that experience. And I figured if I was really shit at biking and it just didn't work out, at least I went on some cool biking holidays and rode some cool places overseas and gained some experience and then go back to work or whatever. But yeah, I guess it worked out.
You're competing almost right away, it seems like, and I think downhill is what you start out doing, and you have a limited time on a mountain bike compared to a lot of the women, and you really have to open it up and let things go when you're racing downhill. What's the fear level when you're on top of a course and something like that?
Downhill is really fun, actually. I enjoy it. I still do. I don't really race anymore, but I don't really find it scary. I guess going that quick is pretty scary, but I think for me, I always struggled with just being fit enough to do this stuff. Like, I thought I was fit, but then come race day, like, I'd just be so gassed that it would be hard to hold onto the bike and go as fast as I could.
With being fit, is it totally different being gym fit compared to being bike fit? Like, nothing compares to just being on your bike every day, getting you in that shape?
Yeah, for sure. That's what I kind of learned is like, I was maybe overdoing the gym side and not riding as much at that point. But yeah, I think the only way to get race fit, maybe I'm wrong, I don't actually, not super big on this stuff, but for me, I think it's just more time on the bike at race pace.
Yeah, if you can do that over and over on a bike, then you know you're going to be in shape to go to the next event. And at these events, are there women riders that you're becoming friends with and that you're going to go ride with, and now you have peers that are starting to push you?
Yeah, kind of. So I met quite a few people through racing, and that was real cool. I was living in Rotorua, and Vinnie Armstrong we were both racing a bit of downhill. I think she had just got into freeride as well. And she'd come hang out in Roto, and we'd go ride the trails there. And that was maybe like the first I'd heard of freeride as well, was from her. And I was like, what even is this? Are you just washing up from racing? But like, it was legit. And yeah, we're just having fun, and instead of just going fast and stuff, we're doing jumps and trying to be steezy.
Yeah, I would think that coming from moto and even BMX tracks, like airtime and tricking features would be something that you're into as well. So that happens once you meet Vinny?
I mean, understanding what it was about that time, yeah. But I mean, when I was BMXing, it was a race, like BMX racetrack. But I always found myself trying to trick the jumps. Like I'd learned like no footers, and I was just trying to throw whips. And I remember trying to learn 360s, like just out of one of the berms, so out of a turn, just going straight up it and trying to 360 out of it. So I was always just goofing around with that sort of stuff, but I was just doing it for fun without actually knowing that like free ride or anything was like a legit thing.
And it is a legit thing, absolutely blowing up at that point. I think it's really starting to explode 2017, 2018. And at this point, too, other events like Rampage are all that people are talking about in the bike world, it seems like. But there was a glaring lack of women at the top of freeride and freestyle events. It was almost a joke. And Rebecca Roosh and Katie Holden realized this, and they create the first Red Bull Formation event in 2019. Were you even aware of that event at this point in time?
Yeah, I remember watching it. Vinny was there, actually. I don't think I'd seen her before she went, but I saw her. I was like following it all online and stuff. I remember watching that and just being like, man, how do I get there? Which I still had no idea how to get there.
Yeah, so it just totally lights a fire under you. Like, I want to do that, but like you said, you have no clue to how to do anything like that. And really, it's all about performing and have people see you and want to invite you to places like that. So you need to just be riding your bike as much as possible and have the right people see you. And the level of excitement at this point for all women, it's like your time has now come in the bike world. And does it feel like the spotlight's about to be shown on women?
Yeah, it did. It seemed like a really good time. I think that happened 2019 and then COVID and all that
Exactly,
stuff.
yeah.
Like, COVID was kind of a good thing. I learned heaps of tricks and stuff just jibbing around during COVID, which I think helped just with my bike skills. And then it was the year after, which was last year, that I was like, to get seen, Crankworks seems to be the best way to kind of break through and like get noticed. So I had Crankworks on my mind, and I was like, I'm going to save up and go do the Crankworks stuff. But actually before that happened, Mons put like a women's freeride camp on in New Zealand.
I mean, that was huge for you and all the women, I feel like. Like, Crankworks was huge to make you a global name, but the opportunity that Mons provided for you guys in creating the Future Ground event, I mean, that created a platform for all of you to get noticed and all of you to progress. Can you tell us about that event? Because it was huge.
The event was huge for me. there was like 10 girls that got invited, and we're all in Queenstown, living in a big house together. We had trampoline sessions, just working on our skills and stuff at the tramp, and then we had airbag sessions, mulch sessions, and just like jams on Wynyard, so mini dream and actual dream and stuff. It was just like a bit of a platform for all the girls to get together and try push and learn some new things. And yeah, they did a pretty good job at like sharing it to the world, as it was probably one of the first like women specific freeride style of events. And yeah, I think that's where I maybe first got noticed. I remember doing it, and I think I had like 500 followers on Instagram or something. So like just my mates really.
Yep.
And then that was kind of like, even in New Zealand, I was pretty unheard of as a rider. So Future Gown kind of in New Zealand made a name for me. And that's where Hamish from Mons first noticed me as well. And he was like, why are you not sponsored and doing more?
So is that your first sponsor? Does Hamish pick you up for Mons Royale there? Because they've been a huge player in just growing women's sports, biking, skiing, everything on the women's side, because they realize that more than half their market is women, and they put their money where their mouth is, and they support women with events like this. And do they start supporting you with either travel or dollars or whatever?
Yeah, they did. Not long after that they like hit me up and got me on some Mons kit and just kind of gave me some guidance on, like, at this point I was just a kid riding bikes. Like, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know how to get sponsorship or any of that stuff. So Hamish was like giving me a bunch of guidance on like how this stuff works, and put me in touch with some good people like Wide Open, who's also like a New Zealand distributor for a lot of the brands that I'm sponsored by now. So he was just like making those connections. Wide Open made connections with Yeti, who I'm also sponsored by now. And it was just like, once you know and you're in, it kind of just started to make sense. But even now, like, I'm still learning so much.
Yeah, but that event is where you stood out as a raw talent and you got picked up by Mons. But is it also the event where you realize that the dream of being a pro biker is really at your fingertips? Like that big risk that you took? I mean, it might not have felt like a risk, but leaving the army and going to focus on bikes, like it's actually going to work out and you are going to become a pro biker, or at least it looks like it?
No, it didn't happen that soon. Like, leaving the army didn't feel like the risk for me. I was like, yeah, this is just good timing, and it was so much fun. Like, I got out of the army in September or October 2 years ago.
So crazy.
Yeah, just under 2 years ago. And I basically like jumped in my van, drove to the South Island, and lived out of my van for like 3 months. So, I mean, it sounds like I was taking a big risk already, but that just felt like good times. And yeah, I was like, this is a cool way to live no matter what the outcome is. I think the risk was when I went to Innsbruck, or I went overseas. This was last year. Holy, feels like it should have been years ago.
Are you talking for the first Red Bull Formation event, or the first one you went to?
Yeah, Formation in Innsbruck and stuff, and like taking that leap to go overseas. And it was like during COVID still, and travel was pretty hard last year, and it didn't really make sense to do it, but I was just like, go now, the time feels right. Just give her a go. And that was like pretty well funded off everything I'd saved from being in the army. I was like, I'm going to go do this stuff and then probably come home really broke, but that's fine.
Right.
So that's where the risk felt like it was for me, is just like putting everything I owned into making this trip work.
And the trip is, you get an invite as the alternate for the 2021 Formation event. And what does that mean? Are you just pretty much building a line, and if someone goes down, you're in?
I didn't get to build my own line, so I was just helping dig for the other girls.
Yep.
But yeah, if someone went down, that would be my shot to get in. So for me, it was like an opportunity to at least go get experience and be in that environment. And if I got the chance, then I was going to try ride. But yeah, I think it was good just being there. I think that made it easier for like getting in maybe this year.
Yeah, and I mean, this is true big mountain terrain. It's steep, it's gnarly. And is this the first time you've really been in terrain like that?
Yeah, for sure. That was like the rawest form of mountain biking. It feels like you're climbing up a cliff. I remember the first time I did it, my knees were shaking. I'm actually scared of heights, so yeah, it was pretty rough, like scrambling up the side of what felt like a really steep cliff on like really loose terrain. And I was like walking up there last year as a digger, and I was like, man, how do you get up here with the bike, and how on earth do you ride down this thing? So it was good for me to see all that and absorb it without feeling like I was there to ride and have that pressure, because I probably would have freaked out. But yeah, going back this year, it's super chill, and you just like, once you know what you're in for, it's just riding a bike.
It's time for round 2 of my sponsors, and I can't tell you how much I love the beer and other tasty beverages that the 10 Barrel Brewery creates. I'll always be a huge fan of the Profuse Juice and their Pilsner. And the craft cocktails, which have real hard A, are potent and kick ass. But what I've really been enjoying lately is their clean line seltzers. These are crisp, refreshing 100-calorie cans of awesomeness that's perfect for these hot summer days. My only complaint is that they go down too fast. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Clean Line and you'll have a new favorite seltzer. To find out more about the brand, the Pacific Northwest's best lineup of beverages, their all-time pro athlete team, and how much they support ski, snowboard, and bike, head on over to 10barrel.com. My final sponsor is Stanley. You remember them as the brand with the green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot, hot, hot. While they still make that iconic bottle, they do so much more than that. I mean, they did invent and perfect the category of keeping things hot and cold, and they've been proven to be better than those other fashion brands who rely on marketing, not product. But Stanley also has all you need for your camping and outdoor needs, and they're offering my listeners the best deal they offer, 30% off all Stanley products. And to get this deal, you're going to want to head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and when you check out, enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all lowercase and all one word, and you'll get that 30%. And orders over $100, all get a Powell Movement beanie. Those are my sponsors. Please support them. Now let's get back into the podcast. I'm sure that first time in person, it's just a full-on learning experience. You're a digger with some of the most incredible riders on the planet there. Are you starstruck at all by some of the women you're meeting, or does that not happen with you?
Yeah, no, that definitely happens. I'm also pretty shy, so I wasn't like putting myself out there a whole lot. And I remember like meeting all these girls was so crazy for me. I was like, wow, I've seen them like on Insta and stuff, like they're in movies and stuff that I've seen. So that felt really crazy, but everyone was super friendly. And once you kind of get to know them and you're just riding bikes and stuff, it's all the same.
Yeah. And you don't get to ride at that one. I mean, I think you probably do on your day off, but you don't get to ride in the event. And you spend a ton of money to get there. All your money from the Army is a lot of it is going to that to get there. And are you more stoked that you're going to be in this event in the future, most likely? Or are you bummed that you didn't get to ride?
Both. So as an alternate, we were allowed to ride a section below the road, which was quite far down. There was like one drop into a trick jump that we could ride. So we got a bit of a session on that. And I think that was enough of a session for like Katie Holden and even just the other girls to be like, oh, holy, this chick can ride a bike. So maybe gain some respect at least just from riding this one feature. And then it was really the day off that I just went nuts and actually crashed pretty bad trying to do a backy out there. But yeah, so I did get some riding in, but really it wasn't enough for me to feel satisfied. And I was like so hungry to get back out there.
So like we said, 2021 is the breakout year for your career. This is like last year. And I would think the most important moment, and I think you've kind of led to this, is the Crankworks event. And how do you get an invite to that one? It's not an open event, I don't think. You need to be invited. How does that happen?
There's like a wildcard application form sort of process. So I emailed Lauren, who runs like that sort of stuff for Crankworks, and asked for the entry form. You fill out this form, you have to submit like your social media stuff, send in a bunch of videos on like your riding and what you can do and stuff, and kind of just explain why you should be there. So I actually tried to do it in 2020 and I didn't get it. So 2021 did the same thing and managed to get a spot. So I got the spot for Whip Off and Speed and Style. You need to be invited, and I got that for 2021, which was also like after Future Ground, which probably helped a ton with like being seen and showcasing what I can do and stuff.
So you get into this event and you know that Crankworks is one of those events that can really jumpstart your career. People make a name for themselves at Crankworks. And knowing this, what are the nerves like for the event? Are you nervous in the start gate for this one, as you know it's the biggest thing you've ever done in your life on a bike?
Yeah, I was definitely nervous because, you know, you don't know where you stack up, or you might get there and just not be as good as you wanted to be. And I wasn't, but like I think for me what really broke through was that I did a backflip, and no one else had done that at no other woman had done that at Crankworks.
Or in a contest ever, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and I knew I could do that. And I was like, well, I tried to not really focus on being the best or like winning and making my name that way. I was like, well, I know I can backflip. I'll just do that, and who cares? Like, tried to not put pressure on for results and was just like, who cares what happens? I'll just do my tricks and hopefully that'll work out for me. And I didn't really expect it to blow up like it did.
Yeah, I mean, because at that event, you win the whip off, but what people are talking about is the backflip. I mean, the whip off's one thing, and it's great that you win that. But the backflip is so huge. And first, do you pay the price a lot learning this trick? And how do you learn the backflip?
Yeah. Actually, learning to backflip for me was probably not like most people learn. I was still in the army at this point, I think. And I was like, man, I really want to backflip my bike. I have no idea how to do this. I don't know any people who were backflipping. Like, I didn't have mates that were into it or anything. Rotorua's got this airbag set up that you can pay to go ride. So one day I was by myself. I don't know why actually. Looking back, it doesn't really make sense what I was up to. But I was by myself. I turned up at this airbag, paid to ride it, and it took me 2 hours of just ripping the bike back and landing on my head constantly. And I had no idea what I was up to, and just like Googled some like YouTube how to backflip videos and just keep sending it till I ripped one round. And then that was like the start. And then I don't think I touched it for a while. And then every time I was at a bag, and then obviously later on I had mates and stuff who were also doing backies. So I was like riding a bit more with other people who were able to like help break down and explain the process with what I was doing. And then it was Queenstown 2021 at the start of the year that I'd been doing them for a while on bags and stuff, and I was riding with a mate or two mates that were also doing the same things, and they're like, you should just rip one to dirt. Like, we've got a mulch right there with the ramp that's exactly the same as the ramp to dirt. Like, it's kind of the perfect place, perfect time to do it. So I kind of had the backing / peer pressure from them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the right place. Everything kind of lined up. I was like, yeah, why not? I kind of put a number on it. I was like, I'll do 7 to the mulch and then take it to dirt. 7 to the mulch consistently. And then I was like, oh, I guess this is on. And then crashed and ate it on my first one. And then I didn't want to just like leave failing. So I was pretty sore, but just like went back and ripped another and got it round. And that was like first one to dirt. And then after that, you just keep going with it as much as you can.
Yeah, just full on commit, and you've got the confidence for that trick?
Yeah, big commitment thing. Yeah, once you are confident with it, then commitment's easy, but it's hard to get that.
And when you do this at the Speed and Style, which is one of the biggest events in the world, and every bike fan's eyes are on the event, you land it 6 different times. And what is the reaction of everyone at the event? Because you don't hit the podium there, and you do change the game with the trick. Is it like when you get to the finish corral, like people coming up and hugging you like you hit the last second shot of a game? Or is it kind of looked at as an afterthought a little bit because you didn't do so well in the event? I don't know how that goes. How did it feel for you?
It was pretty amazing. Like, I had heaps of people like commenting and coming up to me and stuff, and people were just really stoked on it. I remember like some of the other pro girls were watching, and they're all coming up to me and being like, wow, that's so sick that you're doing and stuff. And like, yeah, just some of those people that were like talking to me and being like, this is cool. Like, a lot of people were saying I got robbed and stuff, but like, that's fine. Like, I knew that backflips weren't even on the score sheet. So realistically it probably wasn't going to score where it should in comparison to how some of the other tricks scored. But yeah, everyone was super stoked on it, so that was more than enough for me.
The world at this point knows your name, and it happens overnight, which is pretty crazy. Is this when other brands come to you? I mean, I know Hamish has kind of made some introductions, but is this when the sponsorship process from all these brands really happens? You land those backflips, the whole world's talking about you, and now everybody wants to sponsor you, and you pick up a bunch of sponsors that can pay for your travel and give you a salary and make you the professional mountain biker that you always thought you could be?
Yeah, pretty much, eh? Like, I guess, yeah, it didn't seem that glamorous, but yeah, basically, like, I got a bit of help from sponsors and stuff that year, and it kind of funded me to keep my season going because the funds dried up pretty quickly. It's crazy, like traveling with COVID and stuff, everything just seemed so expensive. So I was running out of money real fast, and luckily a few sponsors pulled through, and it meant I could come back out overseas and got the invite to Audi Nines and stuff. So I was like able to fund that trip and make that happen. And it was just like a bit of a snowball from then.
Yeah, once people start hearing about you, seeing the tricks that you're bringing to the table, they definitely want to sponsor you. And then once usually you get a bike sponsor and people realize that you might have bike ads and you're going to get promoted by the bike company, I feel like that's when other people come in because they want to have that coverage too. They know if they sponsor you, they're going to be in your bike ads or whatever. But who are the brands that start paying you?
Yeah, so first we had Mons. There was SDG, which was like the saddle company I was running. Envy Wheels. They were like kind of those ones that kept the season going. I feel like I'm on the spot a little bit. Oh, Go On Girls. So Go On Girls is like it's like a women's ride group online, and they're trying to help girls up and coming kind of break through into the scene and stuff. And Martha Gill is one of the girls that runs that, and we became pretty good friends, and she'd been following me since Innsbruck and was like, we've got a bit of cash for you to keep your season funded so you can keep going. So yeah, they like chipped in to help out as well.
That's awesome. And are we leaving anybody out? Because you don't want to leave any sponsors out.
No, you're not wrong. I'm a little bit on the spot. I was trying to think back. I think I started picking up sponsors then. They were definitely the ones that like that season kind of funded it. I don't know if I'm missing anyone.
Well, you said Yeti earlier, so people know that that's one of them.
Yeti gave me a bike. I don't think they'd help like fund the season.
Okay. Well, we can leave it at that. It's not like you're missing any major ones there. And we'll go back to events because in 2021 you did so much. There was another Crankworks in Rotorua, but the one that interests me the most is the Megavalanche event. That looked batshit crazy. Can you describe that event to me?
Batshit crazy is the best way to describe it. It's roughly an hour long, top to bottom mountain race. I think the first like 2-3 Ks is on snow and ice, and then you race like from the peak of a mountain all the way to the bottom. And it just goes through so many different types of terrain. Like you go through snow and ice, and then like mountain rock, and then you get lower mountain. It's a bit more like grassy sort of terrain, and then like proper dirt trails near the bottom. And it's just messed up. It's absolute carnage. But it's just one of those races that looks like a really fun time. It's pretty dangerous, I think, but yeah, I really just did that one for a bit of fun. And honestly, if there was a race to do, it would be that. Like, I'd love to go do that again.
It sounds like the most physically taxing on your body based on it being an hour and all that different types of terrain, and plus the snow in the beginning, just bikes stacking up on each other, because I'm sure not everyone's able to hold it together.
Yeah, I couldn't hold it together. I was actually the first one to hit the snow in the race. I kind of took off way too hot and just like got tangled up in a rut, and I took out like half the field. So I went down, everyone piled up on top of me, and then somehow I untangled pretty quickly and just like carried on and came off the snow in like second. So it worked out, but I felt pretty bad for taking out the crew.
Well, that's part of that race, and I think everybody knew that, and I think you ended up fourth in that one. The next big event for you is a first-time event for women. It's the Audi Nines, and Audi always is known for their insane features, at least in the snow Audi Nines. What was the course like on the bike version?
Holy moly, it's actually the craziest thing. So the course is inside a quarry, which is perfect because riding bikes and doing jumps that size is like not good if there's wind. So it was the perfect place for shelter.
Yeah.
And that actually blew my mind so hard. Like, it was my first proper like free ride event that I was in and riding, and it had everything from like a warm-up line to giant moon birders, like trick jumps, a slopestyle course, and a massive free ride line. It had a 60-foot jump in it, and yeah, like the whole course was so mind-blowing.
And at this one, you're named the ruler of the week. That just means you killed it harder than anybody else, or at least that's what everyone thought. And you probably won't say that you did. You'll say that other women did great as well. But what does that mean to you to leave that event, your first proper badass freeride event, and you are looked at as like the queen of the event?
Yeah, it was pretty special. I think Nines was, at this point in my career and life, it was like the coolest thing I'd ever done. It was like just good times, good energy. So I was like frothing the whole time, which I think like when I'm having a good time, that's when I'm riding the best. So I was just trying to absorb as much as I could and just get amongst everything. So I tried to ride as much as I could and ride all the features, and I was just having a lot of fun with it. So yeah, it's pretty special to get that.
Nice. And while all of this is only last year, you know, your meteoric rise in this bike world, is everything pretty much a blur to you because it happened so fast?
Yeah, it's been a real fast one, so it's all kind of like mashed up in my head, but it's definitely been really memorable. Like, it's been so many good times, and I've learned a lot as well. So yeah, it's definitely a lot to process because it's like everything happening so quickly. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to forget it.
And then this year, the women have had a little more time to catch up on tricks. There are more women throwing backflip variations, and I would think that you planned for this and you upped your bag of tricks as well. Did you come into Innsbruck this year with a level of confidence that you've never had before?
I don't know. Yeah, I knew what I was going there to do, and I had a couple of flip combos that I tried to do in Rotorua but crashed and injured myself before I could. So for me, Innsbruck was like the first competition since that injury, and I wanted to go back and dial all those tricks that I'd gone to do in Rotorua and couldn't get done. I knew that the girls had really leveled up over the last year, and it didn't really matter to me. I was like, I've got these tricks and that's what I'm going to do. So I guess that's confidence, but yeah, it was also quite nerve-wracking this time around after an injury and trying to get back onto where I was.
Well, you end up winning both the speed and style and the whip competitions, and while I should talk about these more, I'm not going to because people can see the footage, and we are at the point in the show that I like to call inappropriate questions. This is the part where I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. And this time, I was able to get Harriet Burbage-Smith, a.k.a. Haz, to come up with some questions. And she just happens to be in the room with you or in the place where you are staying right now. So could you bring Haz in the room to do question number 1 live? Because I've never done one like this before.
Yeah, interesting. She won't tell me what the questions are, but she's like, oh, I got to do some questions for you. I'll just grab her. She's just upstairs.
Perfect.
Should I put it on speaker for this?
Yeah, I think speaker's probably the best way to do this one.
Okay, sweet.
And I think I got you talking enough. Like, you talked a lot during the podcast. You said I was going to have to try to force information out of you.
Good questions, I guess. Yeah, you definitely did your homework.
Yeah, that's my job.
Haz Nation, here she is.
I'm nervous for this bit.
No.
Hello, podcast.
Haz is saying hi to the podcast. Hi, Haz. Thank you for coming up with 3 inappropriate questions. I know you've shared these with me before, and we can go with whatever questions that you want to go with. So if you've thought of something even more inappropriate, feel free to share them. But Haz, let's go with question number 1.
Oh, God. I've changed them up I'm starting easy and easing way into more not appropriate.
That works.
The first one is, what's the sketchiest hotel you've ever stayed at? Was it the Ponderosa?
Yeah. The Ponderosa is
A staple in Canada.
Yeah, it's this pretty crack-up hotel we stayed in during summer series last year. Me, Casey, and Haz teamed up on accommodation, and it was just like this weird drive-in motel situation. and it was 3 double beds with maybe less than a foot of space between them. Like,
it was pretty fun for jumping.
Yeah, like it was tight and sketchy.
Was it like run down though? Like people sitting outside of their motels drinking beer and smoking cigarettes and you being scared to go in?
We were sitting outside it.
Yeah, I think we were those people. But yeah, like
I think we used the shower once and then we stopped using it because it was getting blocked.
That's right. We ended up swimming in the river instead of showering.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll call that question number 1. Haz, let's go with question number 2.
Oh, there's so many to choose from. I feel like, should we ask about your hair situation?
What do you want to know?
I just want to know why you have bleached blonde hair on the ends.
Yeah, so I went to Darkfest and I'm calling it big ear hair. It just helps with sending and going large. So everyone at Darkfest was like, the boys were all chopping their hair and putting weird patterns and colours in. So I just got amongst it and bleached the lower half of my hair blonde. And then at the time I actually dyed it blue, but that didn't last too long. So it was like blue, blonde, black, fade going on.
What color was it when you won in Innsbruck? Was it blue and black?
No, it's just like bleach, blonde, and black now.
Okay, because I feel like you have to keep that going for the year. If that's how you started off the year with that hair and winning a bunch of stuff, you might as well keep that going for luck.
Yeah, I think I will. I feel like it's part of me now.
Well, I don't know how you're going to get rid of it unless you just cut it out, but that's like most of your hair.
Yeah, I don't have enough hair to chop it out.
We really can't risk losing any more hair.
I can't even risk brushing my hair because it's like hay. It's like straw. If I brush it, it'll just rip too much out.
Oh, wow.
No, it's not that bad, but it's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad.
All right, we are going to go with your final inappropriate question. I think you need to up the level of inappropriateness because so far we've talked about sketchy motels and hair care products or hair care styling.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay. Yeah. Last time you puked.
Cheeky. It was Innsbruck. What was that, like 3 weeks ago?
No, it was like a month ago.
It was like a month ago. It was pretty funny, actually. Maybe it wasn't funny. How much detail do you want?
It was pretty funny.
I mean, I like detail, especially when it comes to puking.
There was actually 2 occasions, both after I won Speed and Style. The first one, Haz takes a win really seriously. This was my first big win in competition, so I don't really know how this was going down. But I finished the race. She was handing me beers or like spritz things. Like she was making me chug them. And I chugged back a few of them. And I was like still taking photos, interviews, like all of that stuff was still happening. And she made some random strangers buy me spritz that I had to chug. She bought me shots. This was all within 20 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, what a good friend.
And I was in an interview, like proper camera mic'd up interview. And she'd walked over, handed me a spritz, told me to chug it. So I had to pause my interview, chug this spritz. And it was like super bubbly and just like puked right in front of camera during interview.
I love that. That's so amazing. I hope they put that on TV and they were like, this is your Speed and Style champion.
Yeah, they told me they wouldn't. But they've got footage of that. And then the next one was like next morning. Obviously had a big night. And then we went back to Crankworks the next morning to just watch. Yeah, we're watching Slopestyle and pulled up to the car park. Kids Works was on as well.
So that must have impressed all the parents as the kids were looking up to you like, hey, she's the one who won yesterday and she looks like she lost this morning.
Yeah, I was squatting over the edge of the car park
The funniest part was Martha was in the car doing a COVID test, like swabbing her nose because she was sick. And then there's Robin in the corner, like making herself puke. And I was just like, this is so funny.
Like 2 small children and a dad walked over, obviously trying to get to like the pump track for Kids Works or whatever, and just saw me. And I kind of turned around and all I see is like this family watching me puking. And I was like, oh no, this is so embarrassing.
That's an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, you only celebrate your first win once, eh?
Yeah. Well, thank you for those questions, Haz. That was Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast. And I will say, that I've never seen an athlete have the rise in a sport like you have, in any sport, especially with the road that you took to get there. And it's an incredible feat. And while I know you've worked your ass off to get where you are, it really is an amazing story that looks like an overnight success story. But there are no real overnight success stories. There's years of work that goes into it beforehand. But for you, it was only a couple years, and you're on top of the bike world now. So I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast. That was chill.
So that was time with Robin Goomes, and what a rags to riches story in biking. And when I say that, while I'm sure she's not getting rich, she did go from being nobody to being somebody important in the bike world in just about a year. I mean, only a few people had heard of Robin pre-2021, but last year really put her on the map, and based on her Crankworks win a month ago, she's one to keep an eye on as she's just getting started. And based on the way that she celebrated her first win, she has a refreshing, almost old-school attitude towards things which I love to hear about. So pay attention to Robin this year. That's the podcast. At this point, it's time for the review of the week. And I don't think I've read this one before. It's a 5-star review that comes from the former head of the Canadian Protect Our Winners division, David Erb. And here's the review. In 2018, I started working in the outdoor industry. I've had lots of varied work experiences over my career. And although skiing is in my DNA, and I really didn't know much about the mechanics of the industry, despite having magazine cutouts of all the greats on my walls as a teenager. For further context, I wasn't big into social media either. Actually, I remember one of my first conversations I had with a marketing manager for one of the brands, and they used the term IG. I had to ask them what they meant. Anyways, it wasn't long until I discovered the Powell movement, and I can tell you, it's the best window into the outdoor industry, past and present. Mike interviews the people who have shaped the sector and asks the questions we all want to hear, and that I needed to know. How much do the athletes make? How do the contracts work? Who are the movers and shakers, etc.? The balance of having athletes and industry professionals is unique and really insightful. I can honestly say that the Powell movement was my primary orientation course to the outdoor industry, and I was a better person and employee because of it. Thank you, Mike, for creating this space and resource. Thank you, David, for that incredible review. You're in Canada, so I won't be shipping a beanie to you, but I know we're going to meet in person one day, and I'd rather hand deliver it. Or you can email me a US address and I'll send a beanie there. If anybody who's listening wants to win one of the last of the limited edition Powell Movement beanies made by Cole, all you need to do is make a post on social media telling people of how great the podcast is. If you do that, don't forget to tag me so I see it. You can also write a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen. If I read it on the show, shoot me an email at mike@thepowellmovement.com and I'll ship you a beanie. Thanks for considering doing it, and thank you for listening. And it should be known that I do this podcast from a little room in my house, and when the numbers and the reviews come in, it really does make all of this worthwhile. So please continue to submit your reviews as it makes me feel good about myself, and there's something important to that, I feel like. Finally, please support the incredible brands that make this show happen. I only work with the best, and they are Rollerblade, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Elon Skis, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.